So, it continues. Hello there, welcome back to Max's Writing Advice Q&A. In tonight's episode, I've got a selection of questions sent by viewers just like you and picked through a random number generator. As always, before I go on anywhere, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer and remind you that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as the ramblings of a silly person who has still got this not very optimal setup, but let me know what you think about it. For the time being, let's take it from the top. The first question goes a little bit like this. Do you have any tips for editing really short stories, like under 1,000 words? Oh, I do. I definitely have some advice for writing shorter fiction. And one of the main differences between writing a novel and writing a short story is that you have so much less to work with. Now, I know that may seem really straightforward, but you gotta realize that when you bring forward a short story, just like a novel or a novella or a larger piece of fiction, whatever mood, feelings, whatever are the themes of this story must be very much more well packaged within a short story because you have that much shorter of a space to work with. Each paragraph, each sentence, each interaction with characters or with the narration has to bring us closer to that theme, to that mood, to that feeling. So with that in mind, my biggest piece of advice for writing shorter fiction and for revising shorter fiction goes a little bit like this. First off, before you consider doing anything, before you consider getting into the nitty-gritty stuff, do a couple passes of the story, read it a couple of times, fix all of the simple small stuff, fix the misspellings, fix like bad word flow here and there, and once you have a story, a short story, 1,000 words, 3.5 pages, whatever it is, and you're looking at it and you go, okay, I am ready. I want you to look at it, read it one more time, and make notes of your story and asking yourself the following question: What is this story actually about? Not what you want this story to be about, what this story is actually about. After you read it, after you do a whole pass reading it, asking yourself, what is this story about? Again, and I have to like underline this really heavily, not what you want it to be, what this story is actually about. I'm not talking about pumping the story full of meaning or messages, because you can tell very easily when people are trying to do that with their stories, especially with short fiction, because you have so much less space to work with. When people are trying to force a meaning or a message, it feels so contrived and it's so obvious that it's kind of hard to not notice it. But when you look at the story that you wrote and you bring into the foreground the actual moods and themes that appear themselves naturally during the act of storytelling, it doesn't feel as though you're forcing it. It feels as though everything is coming into place. Of course, a story where these things happen and these things were said would be about this, and it all seems to, it almost seems to rhyme. Almost like music, it all just comes together. Now, how do we actually make this happen, though? Well, after you finish doing that read and you actually decide on what the story is actually about by actually reading it, or through the process of reading it, you make notes, and then you go through the story again, and you look at the statements, the ones that show this actual meaning, what the story is actually about, organically speaking, and you make them better. You seek to make them more clear. You look at the statements that contradict this, and you either seek to cut them out entirely or make them work in a way as though instead of working against what the story is about, it works towards that. And then, once you've done all this stuff, I recommend the good old like Max stamp of approval for revision. Let it sit for a while, a couple of weeks. I sure hope you're not trying to do this homework like the night before all this work has to be done. Read it again, and read it as though you are before a crowd. Read it in front of your mirror, read it with a microphone on, and pretend that you're reading it before an audience, because trust me, if you read it in this mindset and you stumble upon a line that suddenly, like, you realize it doesn't sound good, then guess what? That line is not gonna read good. This advice may be more effective for people who are looking to get it to submit a story for a challenge or a contest. And some people out there may think that this is too much work, and I disagree with that wholeheartedly, because the whole point with this, what we're doing here, is to tell good stories, to make fun stories, to create the best stories that we possibly can, and that takes a lot of work, and it does. But I think, and I honestly feel that when you find a short story that just everything clicks, that everything just comes into place, it's like music. It just feels good. It just makes you feel good. And it's one of those feelings of looking at something that almost doesn't make sense geometrically. And by that I mean is that 3.5 pages of writing made this amazing story that couldn't have been otherwise. And I think those are the great finds in storytelling. When you find a short story that just clicks perfectly. I think that that's worth doing and that's worth making, and I hope that these tips help you get there. And with that question out of the way, let's go into the second question of the day. It goes a little bit like this. I keep chasing the new shiny ideas instead of actually sitting down and writing it. I haven't written anything over the past 2 years, and getting back into the process is making me struggle. Should I start with short stories or grab the big guns and jump straight into writing a novel? Oh, well, this is a convenient question to get right after the previous one. Before I do anything, I'll answer your question real nice and simple. I think you should do whatever seems the most fun to you. Simple as that. Because, as you may have noticed from the last answer, short stories are not easier. I don't like that sentiment of the idea that, like, short stories or shorter fiction is somehow like a warm-up to work up to the real writing that is a novel. I don't particularly feel that way, because you go through the whole process with both of them, so ultimately I feel like they're basically the same. I think it's better for you to sit down, be honest with yourself, and ask yourself, what do I want to write? Do I want to write short fiction? Because there's nothing wrong with short fiction. Or do I want to go and write a novel? Now, because I have to do this every time I talk about planning a novel, I have a big 1-hour workshop on my channel for how to plan a novel. It's like probably my favorite video that I've ever done. I go through my entire guide. It's a whole hour. If you want to, get some insight into how to plan a novel in what I believe to be one of the most effective ways, go give it a check out. Now, there's a couple things that I want to talk about. I know that getting back into writing can be incredibly daunting and scary, especially if it's been a really long time, especially if life has gotten in the way or life pushed you outside of writing. It can be incredibly daunting and scary. And what I want you to realize, and follow me along on this, because it's not going to sound happy for like 2 seconds, but follow me along. Whether you want to write short fiction, whether you want to write a novel, pick up the big guns and write a novel, it's gonna be hard either way. No matter what you choose, it's gonna be hard because you're gonna transition from not writing stories into writing stories. It's gonna be hard either way. But I want you to keep in mind that it's kind of just like jumping into a pool. I don't know if you've noticed this, but like you can either like just jump into the pool and just get the shock of coldness out of the way, or you can ease yourself, go down the steps and ease yourself into the shock of going into the water. I know that it's not probably the best metaphor, but the reality is that I feel that as soon as the shock is over, you're gonna get back into writing. You'll be back in your medium and everything will be fine. It's gonna be hard, of course, just like getting back into any other discipline or practice or habit, but it's just practice. It's just practice. I don't want you to feel discouraged. I don't want you to start and then feel as though you're not getting as much done as other people or as much as you used to and feel discouraged, because it's all just about practice. It's just about practice. I swear, I promise, you get better. Ease in. Whatever way you want is just fine. Just get writing, okay? Get writing. And you think we're done with inspirational answers / questions? Well, here comes another one. The last and third question of today's video goes a little bit like this. I've been finding it difficult to stop researching and start writing. I'm not sure if I'm using my research as an excuse to not write. Any thoughts? Okay, now real talk. If you think that if you feel that maybe, just maybe, you're doing something as an excuse to not do something else, it's entirely likely you're doing that something as an excuse to not do that something else. It's more than likely, probably certain that that's what's actually happening. And I can tell you that because that's what I used to do. I'm not gonna go over my whole origin story because I've done that in a previous video, but the reason why I stopped doing tons and tons of world building, and why I stopped doing tons of research, and why I stopped blaming other people for how my writing was not going like I wanted it to, was because I came upon a terrible realization. I realized right when my life was at its lowest that all of this time that I was spending doing world building because it felt like work but it wasn't writing, which was terrifying, and I was doing research because it felt like work but it wasn't writing, and I was blaming other people because it made me feel less bad about the lack of writing that I was doing. All of that time was time that I was not spending writing. And worst of all is that if I kept doing these 3 things, I would never, ever finish a book. And I would never, ever publish that book. And I would never, ever get to tell or get to write stories for a living. That's fact. It's just mathematics. If I keep using my time on this and discouraging myself, I'm never actually gonna have the courage to push all the way through. Not only through the first draft, but then through revision and then through publishing. It's just not going to happen. If you don't write, you won't finish stories, you can't publish books. It's as simple as that. I know it can be scary to jump into a story when you don't have all the answers, but let me tell you something. You're writing the first draft. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to know everything. Again, and I know that I say this all the time, but I want you to remember that the first draft may seem incredibly daunting and scary, but it's actually one of the most safest places to write because no one is gonna see it. You hold all of the control. You alone get to decide when when the world gets to look at this, and you get to say, no, not until this is revised and cleaned and polished and I am happy with it. So please clean that control and keep on writing, okay? Okay, and that's about it for today's questions. So I want to thank you for watching, thank you for listening to what I had to say, and I hope that if anything, I gave you another point of view. If you would like to share your own point of view, your own thoughts on the questions that were answered today, let all of us know in the comments down below, as well as your questions for future videos. But, for the time being, I gotta get going. I have a lot more videos to record, and I'm in a bit of a rush. So again, thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll see you on the next one.